This episode of History Saver is brought to you by Addressing Gettysburg. Addressing Gettysburg is a podcast that shares great experiences, quality programs, awesome guests, and is a welcoming community for all who love Gettysburg. So join in with host Matt Callery and find out why Addressing Gettysburg is one of the top-rated podcasts online today. You can find them on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, CastBox, Podbean, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, and on Instagram, Facebook, and of course, right here on YouTube. So check out Addressing Gettysburg today, where history is not boring. Thank you to Addressing Gettysburg for sponsoring this video.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Today, we're in one of the coolest battlefields and one of the most forgot about battlefields and one of the most important in the Trans-Mississippi area, and that is the Honey Springs Battlefield right outside of Muskogee, Oklahoma. Let's go check it out. Hey guys, so we made it into the Honey Springs Battlefield Visitor Center ran by the Oklahoma Historical Society. This place is awesome. This is Adam Lynn. He's the director. He's a guy you're going to see when you come here. And he's going to tell us why this battle is so important before we hit the field.
This was the largest of over 100 documented Civil War conflicts to take place in what is now Oklahoma and Indian Territory. There were a total of 9,000 troops that fought here, 6,000 for the Confederacy and 3,000 for the Union. Would have taken place on what would have been a very hot and muggy July 17, 1863 day. Unlike today, it would have been a lot hotter on July 17th. Of course, they were fighting over control of what was known as the Texas Road at the time. It's basically today's Highway 69, the main highway that you come in on. And it's also thought to be one of the most culturally diverse conflicts to take place in the entire Civil War. And so the 9,000 troops fought here on that day, and of course, the Union victory here led to federal control of most of Indian Territory throughout the Civil War. One of the things that really stands out is there were the tribal nations that fought for both sides, right? The side that didn't want to fight for the Confederacy, between 5,000 to 8,000 men, women, and children followed Upper Muskogee Creek chief by the name of, and this name is said different ways. We're going to say Apophliohola today, or Abethliohola. Led 5,000 to 8,000 men, women, and children, some warriors of the Muskogee Creek Nation and the Seminole Nation, among others, including those who were enslaved and had self-liberated. They made their way northwest in an attempt to not fight for the Confederacy. This led to the first three conflicts, which was known, or the Muskogee Nation calls the Trail of Blood on Ice. And you see these first three conflicts took place in late November and December of 1861. This really opened the hostilities of the Civil War in Indian Territory. Several hundred, at least maybe thousands of people lost their lives due to starvation and also the winter conditions being cold in this environment here, and that's why it was called the Trail of Blood on Ice as well. This led to their being forced into the new free state of Kansas in 1861, where they became refugees. And many of those that had become refugees would later form 3 Union Indian Home Guards for the Union Army, and later come back to Indian Territory, fight at the Battle of Honey Springs, not only with the Union, but more importantly, to take back their homelands. They brought their wives and children with them as well. Obviously, they didn't fight, but that was what the goal was for those of the Muskogee Creek Nation and other tribal nations that had been forced into Kansas as refugees. And so by the time they come to Honey Springs, they're literally fighting opposite of their own tribal members. And that's not just with the Muskogee Creek Nation, but also the Cherokee Nation. There were over 10 different tribal nations that fought here. And so that's very important to understand. There's a very good book called When the Wolf Came, and that was written by a lady named Mary Jane Ward. And definitely recommend that book. It goes into great detail. So those were some of the things going on as far as the tribal nations are concerned, taking back their homelands, and they certainly did so here at Honey Springs.
All right, guys, so there is a lot more information than I could ever tell you about this battle here and the importance of the Native American aspect of this battle and kind of what was going on in the background of this whole situation we're calling the American Civil War. Here in the West, it was a different situation. So always nice to have someone that knows more than we do to help us learn about the battle here. And we're going to, I guess, go through the museum now and show you the museum off. You guys got to come see this place. And it's off the beaten path, but it's definitely worth coming. We drove out from Tulsa today. Not far at all.
No, not far at all. It's only an hour or so away from Tulsa.
Yep.
Close to Muskogee, and McAllister in between is also close to Arkansas and Fort Smith and everything. So,
well, thank you guys so much for allowing us to come here. Awesome visitor center, and let's go through the museum and check it out. And you guys come see this place for yourself. All right. So we were talking about the Texas Road. Well, this is going to play key to this battle. The Texas Road is going to come up from all the way in Texas. You can see it highlighted there at Culbert's Ferry and Preston, and it's going to come through the heart of Indian Territory. We won't refer to Oklahoma as Oklahoma, but Indian Territory, because that's what it is in 1861, 1862, 63, so on. So 1863, when this battle happens, it is still Indian Territory. And you'll see the highlighted places along here on the Texas Road, including Honey Springs, which is highlighted right there at number 2. You got a Confederate depot here. Confederacy is going to have an ammunition storage here. This is where they're going to be able to keep and gain a lot of their goods. They have, on the morning of the battle, wet gunpowder. Well, this depot is not going to help them on the morning of the battle on July the 17th because half their rifles aren't going to work. But this is going to fall key to the Union Army that's going to be at Fort Gibson, who are going to push in and take out these Confederates before they could get reinforcements that are on their way. So they want to cut the head off of the snake before the snake bites, in other words. So this is the Texas Road. This is going to be key not only during this battle, but also going through the entire American Civil War. Control is wanted of this Texas Road. Whoever controls this Texas Road controls Indian Territory. Whoever controls Indian Territory controls the West. So this is going to be very, very key here, and it's going to extend all the way to Fort Scott in Kansas. So we have some stuff talking about the Texas Road here. An awesome cover wagon depiction. You can see Army bread, some palm soap, rounds of ammunition. This is what it would have looked like for the U.S. Army on one of their wagon trains. And the Confederate Army that is in this area are going to set out cavalry detachments to intercept, just before the battle here at Honey Springs, a load of 200 wagons that the Union Army has coming to them, filled with shot and different supplies and Army bread and soap, and, things like you see here. Well, that attack is going to fail. The Union Army is going to gain supplies. Those supplies are much needed to take out this mission here in Honey Springs. So that's going to play very key here as to what is going on in the area. You got some stuff about talking about the tactics that's used here at Honey Springs, talking about the forces, both Union and Confederate, use different tactics here. They use very aggressive maneuvers. They use artillery. They use formations. They're going to use Elk Creek and Honey Spring Depot to their advantage. This is all going to play key. When you think about a battle, your terrain is key. Without your terrain, you're nothing. And the terrain is going to play a huge part, especially the wooded areas for defensive positions. The brush, the creek, the bridge, the fords, everything is going to play key into what happens here at Honey Springs and the tactics that's used. Then you get the preparations for the battle. Confederate troops at Honey Springs prepared to march on Fort Gibson. They were awaiting 3,000 reinforcements and additional artillery from Fort Smith, as I just mentioned. On July 17th, under the command of Brigadier General William L. Cabell, the command of the Confederate forces at Honey Springs was Brigadier General Douglas H. Cooper, who was a former United States Choctaw Indian agent and officer of the Mexican War. He was in good relationships with the Native Americans. So yeah, it's going to play to his advantage a little bit. The Union advance, after receiving 6 days' rations at Fort Gibson, as we said, the wagon train that was attempted to be raided by the Confederate Army failed. So the Union was able to get that wagon train. They were awaiting that wagon train to get rations and supply those 6 days' rations for them to be able to come here to Honey Springs. The Federal troops crossed the Arkansas River on flatboats around midnight during the rainstorm. They drove an enemy scouting party away. Then, without rest, the cavalry led the column of troops. They began the long march on the Texas Road toward this position where there was a depot here at Honey Springs. However, the Texas Road was the real key here. Daybreak, July 17th, the Confederate advance units encountered at Chimney Rock. They were driven back to the main body of their Confederate Army after the skirmish. Cooper prepared to block the Union advance along the Texas Road by controlling Elk Creek. Again, terrain playing the key here. He disposed his troops in a 1 1/2 mile line on the north end of the creek that would cover the bridge and fords. And he had a reserve force that was guarding his headquarters at the depot. But Cooper ordered the advance guard to take up position along the Texas Road in timber at the edge of the prairie and do everything possible to hold position by keeping Union troops out of cover of the woods. And he also wanted to keep them away from any small streams. They may be able to follow Elk Creek. And after marching 25 miles in just 8 hours, that's crazy, 25 miles in 8 hours, all night in the rain, along a muddy Texas road, he arrived north of Elk Creek at 8 a.m. with soldiers that were wet, exhausted. Their gunpowder was wet. Half their rifles wouldn't work because gunpowder gets wet, it doesn't discharge. They were filling up their canteens out of mud holes in the muddy Texas road. So they were very tired. He then commanded his troops to rest among a small stream that was sheltered from the view of the Confederate Army and waited less than 1/2 mile south. So both armies are going to have this problem with the gunpowder. The Union not so much as the Confederates, but it's going to play an issue. And we talk about the battle beginning after a short bivouac. He ordered his troops into columns, one on each side of the road. They marched southward toward an open prairie, advancing quickly towards Elk Creek. About 1/4 mile from where the Confederates waited in the edge of the timber, they quickly deployed in a line about a mile wide centered on the Texas Road. Confederate artillery opened the engagement, and the Union battery answered. This is going to be around an hour and 15 minutes, roughly, as much as 2 hours of an artillery assault. So I've heard 2 hours, I've heard an hour and 15 minutes, I've also heard an hour and a half. So we're just going to say this lasted anywhere from an hour to 2 hours of an artillery barrage on each side. Each side will suffer casualties with most of the gun crews killed. The day is July. It's very hot here in Oklahoma. Indian Territory is humid, and smoke is going to hug the ground from artillery fire, and it's going to be very difficult to see each other. Also, another factor that's going to come into play here is the Confederate Army has an experimental gun. Well, it's going to be a short version of a cannon. I can't really think of the name of the rifle right off the top of my head, but it's got some explosive shells, and that's going to play key on taking out some Union guns on the field, which we'll talk about when we hit the battlefield. Now, breaking the line, trying to gain the advantage, Blunt ordered his 1st Kansas Colored Infantry to attack the Confederate artillery. The commander ordered them Fitz bayonets to move forward. From this point, the Federal line advanced towards the woods within 60 paces of that Confederate line. The brush and heavy smoke severely limited visibility. This is going to turn the tide of the battle around midday, and in the you got smoke hugging the battlefield, you got woods. It's going to become very hard to see. Well, the 2nd Indian Home Guard had drifted between the 1st Kansas and opposing Texans. Now, Lieutenant Colonel Bowles is going to order that Indian regiment to move back into position. Well, the Texans took this command that they heard when they hear the word fall back as that the Federals are going to start to fall back and retreat. Well, they're going to, what? Chase the Union troops. This is going to be very deadly for those Texas troops, as the 1st Kansas is going to open up a hellacious volley. And this is going to see the flag bearer fall as many as 3 times. And these Southern units are fighting with damp and useless gunpowder. And then they're going to order a retreat back to Elk Creek Bridge. The 29th Texas Confederates lost at least 2 color bearers during the onslaught. We said 3. I've heard both numbers. There were a large number of casualties among the 20th and 29th Texas Confederates. That fact is in stone. That fact we know. They lost a large amount of men. And this was the turning point of the battle that led to the general Confederate retreat south, back across the Elk Creek Bridge. And this is going to leave Union in control for the time being. But there's going to be another battle for this bridge. After the left end of the Confederate center was flanked and the units on the Texas Road broke, Confederates began a general withdrawal back towards the bridge. Cooper ordered his troops to make a stand on the north side of Elk Creek while his artillery moved safely across the bridge to provide supporting fire. Cooper ordered the Creek regiment stationed on the high ground to the north of the creek to support the withdrawal access to Elk Creek. So the Confederate Creeks are over there protecting that withdrawal. Confederate troops managed to slow this Union advance for a little while, but 2 hours of fierce hand-to-hand fighting that would occur along the timber and the area of the bridge, the Confederates making up in numbers what they had lacked in artillery support, they were forced across the creek, and the Union artillery approached the bridge, and they said it's time to get out of here. Because as the Union guns were opened up on them, well, that's going to be very bad. So they counted their losses and retreated. Now, the Texans are going to use their muskets for clubs. They're going to fight back as best as they can, but they're going to get beat back. And then the depot is going to be burned in their process of leaving. They don't want this depot falling into enemy hands, so they're going to burn it. They're going to burn everything to the ground. And then, well, it's all over with. After the long, hot, hard, humid day of fighting, wet gunpowder, your clothes, which is wool, is soaking wet, which isn't fun. They were ordered to salvage any usable supplies and get out of here. And they're going to march east towards Fort Smith as Confederate forces under General Campbell appeared near Honey Springs on the Briartown Road. This was an attempt by General Cooper to deceive General Blunt into believing Confederate forces were uniting with General Cabell's forces, who they were waiting for reinforcements from, and he wants them to think they're going to mount another attack. Blunt ordered his exhausted Union troops to camp up and down this battlefield. They're going to collect the dead. They're going to bury both the Confederate and the Union bodies, and later on he'll receive a letter from the Confederate general here thanking him for what happens, even though they both give a different number of the amount of dead and wounded here on the battlefield. This is going to be a loss of 134 men killed and wounded, as Cooper reported, with 47 taken prisoner. But Blunt is going to report losses of 17 killed and 60 wounded. We don't know the exact number, and a lot of these men probably still lie on this field today. But this is what you see here when you walk in the museum, talking about the aftermath of the battle. The citizens here have to pick up the pieces. They're left with the aftermath of this battle as such is the same story on every single Civil War battlefield. The civilians are always left to pick up the pieces. Gettysburg, prime example of it. Even more so, I would say Franklin, with a 20-year-old soldier being killed in his front yard. Can you imagine? Well, this is going to leave an impact on the citizens and as well an impact on the tribes here who are fighting a civil war within a civil war with their own people, their own brothers, uncles, fathers, sometimes even, are on the opposing sides of this thing. You know, our coolest thing to check out in museums is this kind of stuff. The tangible items. Here's a plate, a cup, and a silverware set. And then if we go over here, here's an example of some K-shot here. And then a cannonball, some fuses. And this is going to be a lock off of probably one of the supply chests. Then here's a sword. Always cool to see stuff like this. Then we walk over here. Here's some of the things you would saw soldiers carrying. This is pieces of the, looks like a Springfield maybe. The trigger lock, the band there, and then some pieces of the bayonet frog here. And this going to be, looks like a cavalry round box there. And then we've got, of course, a CS belt buckle, some bullets, some buckles, different pieces here, mostly symbolizing the cavalry units. And then here's a canteen. This is what your rounds would have looked like as they were packaged here. And here's something from the 1996 Honey Springs Archaeological Project. And you guys are probably wondering what is inside of this bag. That is a cannon fuse. Pretty neat. There's a couple more back there too. So that would have been the actual fuses used to fire the guns here at Honey Springs. So those were actually fired in the midst of this battle, which is crazy that those have survived. So right through here is another cool exhibit I saw as we come in. This is talking about John Brown, the Browns' influences. This is talking about the Missouri Compromise. I mean, just all kinds of information in here to come explore. There's all kinds of stuff here. Brown the Believer. We've been to Harper's Ferry. We've talked about John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, Virginia. If you haven't seen that video, go back and do so here on the channel. Harper's Ferry was an awesome place. Always wanted to see that place, so it's pretty cool knowing that we've been there. We know the story of John Brown. And here's John Brown here, holding the flag to the subterranean passway. And that's his story there. So, yeah, just a lot of information on John Brown and what he's going to do in this area. Here's, speaking of Harper's Ferry, here we go, right here. Then, just notice this. This is very cool. This is a depiction of a diorama of the 1st Kansas Colored Volunteer Infantry Regiment, one of the most famous regiments of all the Civil War. Of course, the 54th Massachusetts Regiment takes precedence. Cool fact, the 54th Massachusetts Regiment attack on Fort Wagner, South Carolina is going to come one day after this battle. So the 1st Kansas, well, they were first. They were the first unit to actually stand and fight and gain that glory. Not the 54th. 54th comes second the next day. People forget about the 1st Kansas. But this is a very cool diorama of what the battle would have looked like maybe in the battlefield. And you can see the troops here in a way. Pretty neat. So as you walk through the museum even more here, you've got some information here on supplying the troops. Talking about what the troops had to eat a lot of times. Army bread or hardtack, what their uniforms, how they would have got their uniforms. I mean, this is just cool. And then you've got communication on the backfield. This is the Signal Corps. These are the Signal Corps flags telling you what motions would have been used for what. Really cool information here. Then this is talking about our favorite thing, the rifles used at Honey Springs. What kind of weapons do they have? And this is talking about the Enfield rifle, the Springfield. And here we are, guns, guns, guns. Our favorite thing in the world, Sharps, carbines, pistols, Springfields, Enfields, lever actions. You can't go wrong with guns, guys. And this is what is going to make this war happen. There's even a double barrel gun up here. So yeah, they were used during the war. At the early beginning stages of the Civil War, you would often see flintlocks used, as we saw at, I believe it was Wilson's Creek. I don't remember. All the days are running together here. But you would see flintlocks used in the early parts of the war, all the way up to 1863 in some cases. And this is an 1858 Remington. And this is an 1851 Remington pistol, talking about the different rounds that would have been used for them. And then you have depictions of what the Federal troops would have looked like. You've got Signal Corps, you've got infantry, you've got all kinds of men here. But more importantly, you have the first-hand accounts of what happens here at Honey Springs that you can go through here and listen to. I've read most of these accounts in different books, and like I said, I'm really pressed for time. We've got other places to hit, and then I got to get back to Tulsa. So we're having to go through very quickly, but I do want to highlight one soldier here. I was asked this morning by a subscriber. What were the Native American troops at Honey Springs wearing for uniforms? My answer to that was a mixture of different things. They would wear cultural, tribal stuff as well, mixed with the usual Confederate uniforms that show their Confederate or Union. And this is what you may have saw. It looks a little ridiculous to some people, but this is what your Native American home guard would have looked like at the time. He would have been wearing tribal stuff. He may have been carrying a bow and arrow. He would have been carrying maybe a gourd canteen, a knife he may have had, tribal shirts, gorgets, medicine bags. Even some of them were wearing war paint. Now, I'd hate that term, war paint. I absolutely hate it, despise it, because it's a cultural thing. War paint, it symbolizes you're going to war, but it's more of a ceremonial, traditional thing for the Native American. But yeah, some of them would have been wearing paint. You would have a Union depiction here of what one of the Cherokee home guards may have been wearing. He's got a gorget, a tribal design shirt with a vest, a leather possibles bag there, and a gourd canteen. And like I said, he may even had a bow and arrow with him. Then you've got more of the Creek traditional look with the turban on and the gorget. This is depiction of maybe what one of the Creek soldiers would have looked like. And sometimes it was hard to distinguish these guys between Federal and Confederate. So, yeah. And then you got one of the cannons here. It looks like this mannequin's having a really bad day. But yeah, it's just such a neat depiction here of the variety of uniforms you would have saw here at Honey Springs. Because you got to remember, these guys are volunteers. They're not even really volunteers. They're more home guard units. They didn't get the stuff that other soldiers would have had. And you remember me talking about an experimental cannon? Well, here's an example of one of those. And I'm going to give you guys some homework because I forget the name of this gun. I really do. And cannons are my favorite thing in the world, so that is my fault completely. But it gives you guys some homework. Leave it in the comment section below. What kind of howitzer is this? Yeah, let me know. There's some homework for you. If I can't think of it, well, maybe you guys can answer it here on the episode. Then you've got examples of what your cartridge boxes, cap pouches, knapsacks will look like. Your tins that went inside of cartridge boxes, your bayonet frog. And then you've got some, looks like candle holders here. And just different things that the soldier would use personally on his person during the battle here and throughout the war. Things that connect you with these soldiers are very personable. And what they have on them tells us a lot about what life was like for them. So these things, no matter how minute, how unimportant they may look, are very, very important historically. And in the research side of things, they could tell us a lot of different information. So even the smallest things, such as a button, could give us a whole lot of information. And yeah, this is Very cool museum. One of the best I have ever saw. And there's a really cool video here as well. And if we pick up, let's see. This is Private Dallas Bowman, Company K, 1st Choctaw and Chickasaw Mountain Rifles. Maybe you can hear that. So yeah, you could come through, read their accounts, hear their accounts, put into words, get information here, and there's an awesome 3D video here as well. Don't have time to watch it today because we got other places to go, but I want to make sure you guys see this battlefield. And this is probably one of the coolest places I've been able to come. So this has been the Honey Springs Visitor Center ran by the Oklahoma Historical Society here in Muskogee, or right outside of Muskogee, Oklahoma. You've got to come see it for yourself here at Honey Springs. We're going to get out of here and we're going to head on the battlefield. But you guys aren't going to see that in this video because, well, if I put it on this video, then you're going to sit here for 2 hours watching a video and get tired of me talking. So we'll see you on the next episode from the battlefield here at Honey Springs. I know you're looking forward to it. So am I. But come visit here for yourself. Trust me, they'll take good care of you, and there's a cool amount of stuff here to see. So let's get out of here and let's hit the battlefield. I'll see you on the next episode. Until then, keep preserving history. Stay safe as we continue this tour of history across America.